Have you ever wanted something so badly, only to destroy it the moment it gets close, you finally feel seen, and then disappear, you fall in love, and push them away, you get the dream job, and miss every deadline? What if I told you? This isn't failure, it's not even fear, it's protection. In disguise. And the part of you that keeps ruining things might just be trying to save you. There's a moment that changed everything for Daniel, one sentence, one memory. And it opened a door he didn't even know existed. What he found behind that door wasn't a monster, it was a child, still waiting to be heard, still protecting him the only way it knew how. By stopping anything that felt like risk, like joy, like love. If you've ever felt like you're running from yourself, this isn't a story about success. It's a story about finally stopping and listening, because once you do, everything changes. Daniel had a gift for disappearing, not from rooms or cities, but from moments that mattered most. He'd work for months to land a client, then ghost his own email. He'd meet someone special and vanish after date 3. He'd promise to change, and then watch himself break that promise the next morning, over and over. It was as if a hidden part of him waited quietly for things to start going well, then flipped the switch. Friends called it fear of success. Therapists hinted at unresolved trauma, but to Daniel, it felt simpler and scarier. It felt like he was cursed, like no matter how hard he tried, there was something broken inside him. He'd look at others thriving, finishing projects, building relationships, showing up, and he'd think, what's wrong with me? Why do I run when I finally feel safe? Why do I destroy the very things I crave? He read the books, went to the workshops, took the supplements, burned the sage. Still, each time something good came close, something inside said, not safe, not now, not you. He called it sabotage, but it didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like a betrayal from within. And the worst part, he had no clue how to stop it. Sometimes the pattern showed up in whispers, other times it screamed, and every time he thought he'd escaped it, it returned, until one night, sitting in a cheap therapist's chair in downtown LA, he heard a sentence he couldn't unhear, not from a book, not from a coach, but from his own mouth. 4 words barely above a whisper: I ruin good things. And the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy, alive, as if someone else inside had finally spoken, not to blame him, but to be heard, to be seen, to be named. And that was the beginning of everything unraveling, not in chaos, but in clarity, one thread at a time. What if the part of you that ruins everything isn't broken at all? What if it's not a flaw, but a message? That was the question Daniel couldn't shake. Long after that therapy session ended, he walked home that night with 4 words still echoing: I ruin good things, not as a judgment, but as a key, a doorway. And when he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, it hit him. What if I'm not self-destructing? What if I'm protecting? What if the reason I can't hold on to love isn't because I'm unlovable, but because somewhere in me, love once meant danger? Maybe success isn't scary because I'm lazy. Maybe it's scary because it means being seen, and maybe being seen once led to pain. He started to realize there wasn't just one Daniel living his life. There were versions of him, tucked away in memory: the ambitious one, who wanted to try; the frightened one, who learned not to; the angry one, who never got to speak; the one who still whispered, it's not safe. And they weren't enemies, they were exiles, parts of him he'd pushed aside for years, because the world told him, be strong, be better, be normal. But in doing that, he divided himself, cut off from the parts that still hurt, still feared, still remembered. And now, they were speaking the only way they knew how, through sabotage, not to destroy him, but to get his attention, to remind him, you left us behind. And that realization didn't bring shame. It brought softness, grief, yes, but also clarity. He wasn't broken, he was divided, and wholeness would begin the moment he stopped fighting those parts. and started listening. Have you ever felt that, like there's a version of you, frozen in time, still waiting to be heard? If that resonates, you're not alone, you're not lost, you're just returning. And sometimes that begins with 4 quiet words: I see you now. It started with a smell. Old leather, warm dust, the faint scent of eucalyptus from a tissue box nearby. Daniel was sitting in the same therapist's chair he'd sat in for months. But something felt different that day. Maybe it was how quiet the city was outside. Maybe it was how tired he felt of repeating the same questions. The therapist asked gently, "When's the first time you remember feeling like love was too much?" Daniel opened his mouth to answer, then paused, and in that pause, a door creaked open in his mind. It wasn't a dramatic memory, no screaming, no violence, just a moment. He was 6, standing in the hallway, holding a drawing he'd made for his mom. He'd spent all afternoon coloring it. He ran to show her, beaming, but she was on the phone, busy, tense. She looked down, saw the crumpled paper, and sighed, not cruelly, just exhausted. Not now, Daniel, later. That was it. 2 seconds, and everything shifted. That version of him, tiny hands holding color, froze. He didn't throw a tantrum, he didn't cry, he just folded the drawing in half and never showed it again. The therapist didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch, and Daniel, he felt it, not just the memory, but the belief that grew from it. If I ask for attention, I'm a burden. If I show too much, I'll be dismissed. If I need love, I'll lose it. And suddenly, so much made sense. Every time he backed away from connection, every time he downplayed his success, every time he felt joy and then guilt, that 6-year-old boy was still in the room, still waiting for a moment that never came, not out of weakness, but out of loyalty, trying to protect Daniel from ever feeling that again. And Daniel, he didn't hate that part anymore, he just felt sad, sad that no one had told that boy, "You're not too much." He allowed to be seen. That moment, that quiet hallway, became a map, a place he could return to, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. And in doing so, he began to see the pattern not as punishment, but as a memory, asking to be met. Not fixed, not analyzed, just held. And maybe that's where healing begins. Jung called it the shadow, not because it was darker, but because it lived in the places we refuse to look. For Daniel, the shadow wasn't rage or destruction. It was quieter. It looked like procrastination, silence, missed calls. It looked like promising to try and then not showing up. It looked like smiling while something inside shut down. The shadow isn't evil, it's exiled. It's made of every feeling we were told not to feel: anger, jealousy, need, grief. And it doesn't disappear, it waits, unseen, unheard, until it begins to act out, not by screaming, but by sabotaging. Not to harm, but to guard. Daniel started to see his patterns not as failures, but as signals. His avoidance wasn't laziness. It was fear wearing logic as armor. His perfectionism wasn't discipline. It was shame in disguise. He remembered moments he thought he'd forgotten, like being 9 and getting a B on a math test. His dad said, "You're better than this." And he believed it, so he tried harder, smiled wider, and buried the part of him that felt not enough. That part didn't die, it became shadow, and it waited, not to hurt him, but to protect him from ever feeling that B again, even if that meant never trying, never risking, never finishing. Shadow work isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about finding what was buried and asking it why. Daniel began writing things down, not to analyze, just to name. What am I afraid people would see if I stopped performing? What emotion do I punish in myself the most? Who taught me which feelings were acceptable? And with each question, something softened. Not because the answers were easy, but because they were honest. He wrote a word on a page one night, just one. Enough. And then sat in the dark, as if waiting to see if that part of him would believe it. Shadow isn't something to fight. It's someone to welcome, the version of you still waiting in the wings, hoping one day. You turn around and say, I remember you, if this part of the story speaks to you. If you've ever buried a feeling so deep you forgot how it sounded, tell me. Just type the word enough in the comments, not for me, but for the part of you still waiting to hear it. There's a strange kind of loyalty in pain, especially the pain we grew up with. Daniel began to realize his sabotage wasn't rebellion, it was devotion, the kind you don't even know you're giving, because it was promised long ago, promised to a younger self who swore, never again. Never let them in, never show your truth, never risk being left in that hallway again. And so, every time joy came close, his system flinched. Not out of fear, but out of loyalty to that old vow. It's why he pulled away from partners who were kind, why he missed deadlines on projects he actually loved, why, when things felt good, he suddenly needed space. His shadow wasn't punishing him, it was protecting him from the cost of being fully seen, because if love once hurt, and success once brought ridicule, then sabotage isn't sabotage, it's armor, it's a reflex that says, I'd rather destroy it myself than wait for it to be taken. Daniel began noticing the voice inside that said, this is too good, it won't last. You don't deserve this. He didn't try to silence it, he did something radical, he listened. And asked, what are you trying to protect me from? At first there was nothing but silence, but over time the answers came. If they see the real you, they'll leave. If you shine too bright, they'll come for you. If you love this and lose it, you'll shatter. They weren't rational, but they weren't lies either, they were echoes. Echoes of moments where joy turned into pain, where presence became punishment, so the shadow learned. Better to numb than feel, better to exit than be abandoned, better to fall than be pushed. Daniel didn't argue, he thanked it for trying to keep him safe all these years, even if that safety came at the cost of his own aliveness. And in that gratitude, something shifted. He didn't need to fight himself anymore. He needed to renegotiate the terms, because the part of him that sabotaged wasn't a villain, it was a loyal guard standing at the door of his heart, asking every joy, are you safe for him yet? And slowly, Daniel began to answer, yes, we're safe now. What if I succeed? That question haunted Daniel more than failure ever did. He never feared being bad, he feared being brilliant, because brilliance draws eyes, and being seen meant being judged, it meant being exposed. So when things went well, he didn't celebrate, he panicked. He remembered the job offer in Chicago, 6 figures, dream title. Creative freedom, he told himself he was ready, but the night before his first day, he couldn't sleep. By morning, he had emailed HR, something came up. He didn't go, no explanation, no follow-up, just silence, because success wasn't just a goal, it was a spotlight, and spotlights can burn. Daniel realized something chilling. He didn't sabotage to avoid failure, he sabotaged to avoid attention, because attention in his past had always been conditional. Do well and we'll be proud. Be quiet and we'll love you. Don't shine too bright or they'll think you're arrogant. So he learned to dim, to self-regulate his own light, not because he lacked ambition, but because ambition once led to rejection. He remembered middle school, the science fair. He built something he was proud of, but when he won first prize, his best friend didn't talk to him for a week, just one sentence. You think you're better than us now, and that stuck. So every time Daniel got close to success, that voice returned, not his, but internalized, a warning. Rise too high, they'll cut you down. So he learned to self-sabotage. As a way to self-protect, to stay small, was to stay safe. But safe doesn't mean alive, and comfort doesn't mean fulfilled. Daniel had to ask himself, what would happen if I actually let myself win, not pretend, not apologize for it, not shrink? Just receive. And then came the harder question. What am I afraid would happen if joy stayed? Would people leave? Would I owe something? Would I stop being relatable? These weren't logical fears. They were emotional blueprints, patterns etched by pain. He began to write them down, not to solve, but to witness. Success means being alone. Joy always disappears. Love comes with a bill. He didn't fight them, he just sat with them, and slowly, their grip loosened, because when you name a fear, you reduce its power not by force, but by presence. And Daniel started to wonder, what if thriving is dangerous? What if it's just unfamiliar, a foreign land he was finally ready to enter? Without running back to what was known, without shrinking at the door, without ghosting his own future. He didn't need all the answers, he just needed permission to try, to stay, to shine. Without flinching, Daniel bought a journal, not a fancy one, just a spiral notebook with soft pages. He didn't know what he was doing at first. Only that something inside him wanted to speak, but not out loud, so he began writing letters not to people, but to parts of himself. Dear shame, dear fear, dear rage. He didn't filter, he didn't correct, he just let the pen move. The first letter was short, just a few lines. Dear shame, I know you think you're helping, but I'm tired. Please tell me what you need. He stared at the page, nothing happened, no revelation, just stillness. But he came back the next day, and the next, each letter. A little longer, each one. Less angry, less afraid. He wrote to the part of him that disappeared when he felt close to others, to the one that picked fights just to end things first. To the voice that whispered, this won't last. One night he tried something new. He wrote back from the part he was writing to. It felt strange, like pretending, but also honest, as if something buried was finally answering. Dear Daniel, I act out because you never let me speak. I don't want to ruin things, I just want to matter. He felt his hands tremble, not from fear, but from recognition, like hearing your own voice for the first time, coming from a place you forgot existed. The letters became a ritual, not every night, but enough to build trust with the parts he used to silence. One by one, they showed up, not as demons, but as children, each one with a wound. Each one holding a memory. He met the part of him that believed rest was laziness, the one who cried in secret at 12, then learned to never cry again, the one who laughed loudly to hide how much he wanted to be liked. He didn't rush them, he just listened. No fixing, no therapy speak, just presence, and in that presence, they softened. They didn't vanish, but they no longer screamed. Some whispered, some cried, one just sat silently. Holding a crumpled drawing, he looked at that part and said, I see you. And for the first time, it felt like the words landed not as affirmation, but as reunion. Daniel wasn't just healing, he was coming home, one page at a time, one letter at a time. One forgotten part, finally heard. There's a moment in healing when the noise quiets, not because the pain is gone, but because the parts of you no longer have to scream to be heard. Daniel began to notice it in small ways. He didn't flinch when someone complimented him. He didn't disappear when plans felt exciting. He didn't sabotage joy the moment it arrived. He still felt the urge, but it came with space now, space to choose. He'd sit in his apartment, pen resting on the table, and instead of writing from pain, he wrote from presence. Dear self, we're not rushing today. We're not hiding, we're just here. It was subtle, no fireworks, no grand transformation. Just a quiet shift, a softening, like how winter gives way to spring, not with noise, but with a single bud. He called it silence. But it wasn't empty, it was peace, the first time in years. He could sit with himself and not feel like running. He went for walks without headphones, ate without distraction, breathed fully. And when discomfort came, as it always does, he didn't drown it. He said, I hear you, and the discomfort, past, not gone, but seen. It's strange, he thought, how we spend so much time fighting our inner world, only to realize all it ever wanted was to be welcomed. He remembered the drawing, that hallway, that boy. He didn't revisit the memory to relive it. He went back, to sit beside it, to say, I won't leave this time. That small act, that choice to stay, changed everything. Because healing isn't a finish line, it's a relationship with every part of you that once felt abandoned. And Daniel was learning how to show up, not just for others, but for himself. The boy, the teen, the man, all versions. Woven together, no longer split, no longer silenced, he looked in the mirror one morning, and for the first time, didn't flinch at his own eyes. They weren't filled with shame or fear or pretense, just presence, and that felt like truth, not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that hums beneath the surface. And stays, Daniel didn't wake up one day and feel healed. There was no parade, no certificate, just a new rhythm in his breath, a stillness where panic used to live. He began noticing things like how he didn't over-explain himself in conversations, how he could say no without guilt, and yes without fear. He showed up to meetings early. Not to prove something, but because he wanted to. He stayed at dinner after the laughs faded, not waiting to run, just present. When he felt discomfort rising, he didn't escape, he named it. I'm afraid of being seen. I feel like I'll disappoint them. I want to be liked, but not at the cost of myself. Each truth spoken made the fear smaller. And the part of him that once screamed just nodded now, not gone, but not dominant. There were still hard days, he still got triggered, still doubted, but the difference, he didn't shame himself for it, he didn't spiral, he anchored, breathed, asked, "Which part of me is afraid right now?" and listened. One afternoon, a friend asked him, "What changed?" Daniel smiled, not because he had a perfect answer, but because he knew exactly what had shifted. I stopped trying to be someone and started coming back to who I was before I split. He realized wholeness isn't perfection, it's permission to be messy, to be real, to love all your versions, even the ones who once ruined things, especially those. Because now, they weren't ruining, they were integrating, they were part of him. Guides, messengers, witnesses. He looked at old journal entries and didn't feel shame. He felt reverence for the one who kept writing. Even when it hurt, even when nothing made sense, because somewhere deep down, Daniel believed there was more than survival. There was freedom, not the kind sold in books, the kind earned in quiet moments, when you choose to stay, to breathe, to hold your own gaze and whisper, "I'm not running anymore." And he meant it. Maybe you felt it too, that part of you that waits quietly until things start going well, and then whispers, "We don't do this." Maybe it's not loud. Maybe it's just a hesitation before joy, a pause before connection, a pattern that pulls you back. Right when you thought you were ready to move forward, we call it sabotage. But what if it's not? What if it's a messenger, a memory, a moment still echoing inside, asking not to be erased, but to be understood? Daniel learned that self-sabotage isn't the enemy. It's the invitation to look at the parts of you you've buried, to sit with them, name them, honor their role, and slowly welcome them back. Integration isn't glamorous. It's not always beautiful, but it's real. It's the quiet choice to say, "I will not abandon myself again." Not when things get hard. Not when joy feels too big. Not when fear returns. You don't need to become someone else to heal. You just need to become someone who listens, who stays, who dares to ask, "What if this part of me isn't trying to destroy me, but protect me?" And then answers. Let's talk. If something in this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt like your shadow was running the show, leave a comment. Just write, "I'm ready to stop running." Not because it's the end, but because it's a beginning. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not alone. You are whole, especially in the places you thought you weren't. And maybe, just maybe, your shadow has been waiting all this time, not to fight you, but to walk with you back home.